Oh wow, that's holy shit. Bro, are you seeing this?
Yeah.
So we've had two major breeds of comments, right? One that says, oh, we want you to do more guns that you like, and then, whatever. And then there's the ones that really enjoy us being critical of a firearm. And so we thought it would be fun if we took a firearm that was...
Like, objectively, nobody has anything nice to say about it.
Yeah.
We wanted to find a firearm that everybody agrees. It's just dog water.
Yeah. And we could take it apart and...
Like, how objective can we possibly be about this?
Right.
Like, if a gun's objectively bad, surely we should have bad things to say about it. So that gun, of course, is the Colt All American 2000. A gun with an absolutely storied reputation for having nothing redeeming about it and being absolute crap.
Yeah.
Name a problem a gun can have. Some gun writer back in this gun's heyday had something negative to say about it.
Right.
Claiming horrid accuracy. In some cases, it would shoot 25-inch groups at 25 yards.
Yeah. In fact, one reviewer said it would be impressive if you could get less than 25
They'd
inches.
be impressed for this gun to shoot 100 minute of angle. Some reviewers saying that they never made it through a single magazine without having some sort of a feeding or ejection issue. Some commentators saying that the trigger pull on the gun makes it so useless that it's impossible to use. Reliability issues, people claimed. There's just a load of bad things that people have to say about these guns.
Yeah, no,
all the way up to and including, right? There was one or a number of recalls that happened with these guns where they were so bad, Colt had to try and grab them all back and fix them.
Yeah, and fix them. And it's interestingly when you look into what was the purpose of the recall, like what did they actually fix?
You'll either find information where it's people disagreeing with each other, or information where it's people saying something that doesn't make sense, or it really was. I mean, I searched for probably at least 10 to 15 hours. What the heck happened with this recall? And there were some people who were like, oh, they just stamped an asterisk on the gun and changed nothing. It was like all small internal stuff.
Right.
They machined an extra thing or changed this or that. Really difficult to find information on it.
Right.
Stay tuned, because we did figure it out.
We figured it out in a very interesting way that was kind of unexpected. But so yeah, this is the AM2000. It's by first impressions, it looks.
People complain about it being like the ugliest pistol on the market, and I guess if you compare it to the fact, right, it's Colt who made this,
right?
And at this point in Colt's history, they had lost the competition for the M9 to the spaghetti gun,
right?
Which is it's a blow to America's pride at some rate, right? Especially the people who like wear their 1911s with their heart on their sleeve, the Colt 1911 best gun ever,
right? Which
is an attractive looking gun. And then Colt comes out with this. You could be excused for saying like
that it's ugly,
bro.
Yeah,
Colt really?
It's ugly for a Colt, right? But when you kind of dig into it,
I think objectively, for its era, like that sort of 90s, 2000s, like think about what the cars look like.
It's got that like Pontiac Sunfire vibe, and it, the corners are all rounded or whatever. But aside from that, the form kind of follows the function, which I think is a good thing in gun design. One thing that we saw a lot of was, and even modern people, there's a couple channels who have done reviews on them, and they have nothing good to say about these guns. They say that it's got a staple gun trigger, totally unusable. Oh, and the big thing that we hear about is that
inherent accuracy
issues, because how stupid could you possibly be to put a front sight on a moving part?
On a removable barrel bushing.
Right, because this is the barrel bushing, and that's actually part of how you take the barrel out. This rotates and comes out.
And that really takes us to sort of this gun's history, right? Where did this gun come from? So like I said, Colt had lost that M9 contract to to Beretta, right? Mm-hmm. And that was bad for Colt. Colt's entry was a weird gun.
Right.
And I believe they were still trying to make it single stacked, despite the fact that the government was like, we need more capacity, and Colt's like, you want
to make it longer?
You want a weird 1911 with a slide mounted safety and 9mm? And the government was like, no, we didn't ask for that. Sorry. And then there was a follow-on contract to replace the M9. Colt also didn't win.
Right.
So Colt was like not doing great at this point. Colt was definitely looking for a win, and then like the big death knell for Colt was FN got the contract for the M16A2.
Right. And so Colt is like, whoa.
Because
Like,
Colt figured they could just milk the M16 forever because nobody could figure out how to do it great like them.
Right.
And then FN did.
Yeah.
And then Colt's in the situation of nobody's really buying their select fire line in
Right.
large amount. Nobody bought ARs at this point in history. Like
Right.
this was a slump of AR sales because the people who wanted people who served in Vietnam and found the AR-15 favorable would then just go buy one, buy their SP1s or whatever.
Right.
The M16A2 is different. So there were Colt collectors, and Colt collectors did buy them, but that was the primary audience that was buying ARs.
Right.
It wasn't target shooters. It wasn't sporting
They were
shooters.
way too expensive.
Right? Nobody considered it a sporting rifle
Yeah.
then. The people who bought it were Colt collectors or people who were interested in military firearms.
Right.
So it really didn't sell well because neither of those markets was particularly huge. And Colt can't survive forever. Especially like Vietnam era Colt,
Right.
powerhouse. They have so much money they don't know what they're doing with. They're designing guns without a customer in mind. They're like, what if we made an M16 LMG? And they did it multiple times. They did 3 or 4 different M16 LMG prototypes without anyone ever asking for one. Colt was cash flush, research and development heavy. And they lost that momentum massively with the M9 and then the M9 follow-on that then reselected the M9. And then they lost the M16. And so they find themselves floundering.
Yep.
Now,
and so what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for the law enforcement.
Right. So there's sort of this up and coming shift from law enforcement that they've signaled they don't necessarily want double action revolvers only anymore. That the Glock is starting to get more and more of that market, and everybody sees this. Mm-hmm. And despite this, like there's numerous and vocal objections from police departments about things that the Glock does.
Right.
And we'll touch more on that in a bit. But that was sort of where Colt's mindset is at, is they see now this market that they could step into. Because previously, Colt had owned that revolver service department. Smith & Wesson snagged that away from them to the point where, like, at one point in time, it was like a 5 for 1, then a 10 for 1, then a 15 for 1. Smith & Wessons were outselling Colts because they were half the price, and they were just as good.
Yep.
So Colt is not doing great. Colt is doing so bad that they don't have money. They can't fund a research and development department, and from what I understand, Chris from Small Arms Solutions has talked about, Colt got rid of their research and development department. They're like, go away, you idiots. We'll make M16s and 1911s for the rest of forever. Yeah. And then they couldn't do that. And they're like, they all work for other companies now.
Yeah, and then also the double eagle happened before this, right? Where they were like,
I believe so.
Yeah, they were like, people want double action. And everyone's like, what?
A single stack 45 double action, nobody asked for that.
I didn't want that.
So, Colt was floundering, and so Colt was aware of Eugene Stoner and Reed Knight had been working together through Knight's Armament Corporation. Right. And they specifically, they were making like add-on bits for ARs at this point.
Right.
So this is taking place like late 80s, early 90s. Like there's sort of an interesting in a military modernization of the AR-15 is something that people are at least toying with.
Right.
And so that's sort of where Reed Knight.
Yeah, they were making little bingles, right?
Reed Knight and Stoner were partners there. I guess they were working on what would eventually evolve into like railed forends for ARs.
Right, yeah.
So that's what they're getting to eventually. So they're messing around with that sort of a thing.
Well, so before we get into how this gun developed, because we wanted to see this gun, right? That we've seen Ian talk smack on it. We've seen Small Arms Solutions talk smack on it. Massad Ayub built his career.
Massad Ayub, like, foundational to his career, was defecating all over this gun. And Colt's own president, after leaving the company, insulted this gun. Like, this is the stupidest piece. Like, it was, I think he said, it's like the biggest embarrassment that Colt has ever faced.
Right.
Like the dude who was responsible for this mess was embarrassed by it. Like, nothing nice to say about it.
Yep. And so
it's like that's your kid, and you're like, dang, my kid's an idiot. Fuck up. You don't want to see that.
Well, so we got one, and I took it into the back, and I started shooting it, and it wouldn't fuck up.
Right.
And the trigger isn't amazing, but when I put myself in the mindset of police departments are moving from revolvers, they're scared of the Glock because of...
Like there was a point in time where the consensus was Glock triggers were too light and they go off on their own, because every cop up to that point has been trained on a double action revolver that's carried with a hammer down.
Right.
When they pull that shit out of their holster, they're going to stage the trigger because it's a reasonable thing to do. And then with a Glock bang, they've shot themselves.
Yeah.
And then,
which they do all the time to this day.
And I believe at a point in time there was even a euphemism that was Glock leg,
right,
where cops stage their trigger, getting it out of the holster, and shoot themselves with the Glock because it's got a trigger pull that's about the same length as a double action revolver on a Glock, but it's lighter.
Right.
And that led to all sorts of teething issues. And of course, again, that's a thing where it's a software issue. and that hardware solutions to software issues aren't always great.
Right.
But Colt was cognizant of the issues that existed and realized police officers were able to get hit with double action revolvers.
Yes.
It's not like double action is unusable.
Right. And so, and this solves some of the issues with double actions as well, which we'll get into. But when I put myself in that mind space and I'm thinking, I am a poorly trained police officer.
Yep.
There's a risk of me shooting the wrong person. I'm not incredibly familiar with my gun. So I aimed at the target and I very intentionally pulled the trigger and I hit it every single time. And I've shot a lot of LEM triggers. I'm a Walther collector. I have the law enforcement model Walthers. I have a hard time hitting stuff with this. And then you messed with it and you agreed that. So
I think of we were comparing to other double action triggers we fired. Anything that's a semi-automatic double action only trigger. This is the nicest one. And we came to the conclusion. Could we think of any others? No. The Berettas, no. The Walthers, no. There was Smith
the Walthers double action is awesome because it has a double action, but that's a predominantly single action gun.
Right, but there are Walthers that were single action only specifically for cops, so they stopped shooting themselves.
Miserable,
horrible.
Yeah.
There were Smith and Wesson's double action only. No, not for me.
Yeah.
I think this was better than them.
This was better, and so obviously, I've always said, we talk about, you can get lemons, but you can also get apples, right? Something that's too good. So it's obvious that we got a lemon, right?
Yep.
So we got another one. It was just as good.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it feels the same. It shoots the same. It ran the same. Had again, all the quirks with the trigger, the same. It was fundamentally the same gun.
And interestingly, this one never went in for its recall.
Yes.
And then there was another version of this. So it's like, oh, maybe
right. So there's some confusion that people were having online. Because by the time we had this gun, we were deeply interested in the history, and we will touch on that in one moment. But as we were trying to learn more about these guns, it became apparent that there's the aluminum frame version that Colt made for only the first year of production, and there's not a ton of those guns around. So we figured, okay, maybe we should at least pick one of those up so we can make sure we're not just talking complete bullshit out of the side of our mouth.
Right.
Because the things that we're finding is so contrary to everything we've read about it, including from your so-called trusted sources, like Masada Ayub ostensibly is a trusted source.
Don't do this.
Meow. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But everybody was saying how bad it's supposed to be, but we were finding only good things. So
we got, maybe these were later guns, right? Maybe they had sorted some of this out because the recall didn't happen until 95. So we got the first year gun.
And the first year gun does have some quirks about it.
Yeah.
We both agreed the trigger sort of got more of like a like it's a little bit more punctuated. But for me, with the aluminum guns, there's a punctuation before the trigger actually breaks every time, and I can stage that trigger stage that trigger like I know what I'm doing with a double action revolver.
Right.
And spoiler alert, I don't.
Right.
I'm really bad with double action revolvers. This thing, I was surprising myself how well I was able to shoot with it. Like to the point where it was like a head scratching moment. Like something has gone weird and wrong here. So there was really only one reasonable thing that could be done at this point.
Right.
Same thing.
It was the same.
That is the same.
It was the same. The guns are fine.
They both have the click, 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 click.
They're identical.
Yes.
I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, we're going to be accused of being contrarians or whatever.
But here's the problem, right? At every step along our way, this was such a non-manufactured discovery for both of us along the way. Where it's not like we set out to we'll buy this gun and make up some stories about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to shit on this. Like I've always wanted one because everything everybody says about it's like, oh, it's so bad. Like at the end of the day, everybody who's an American understands being a Colt collector. Whereas Colt's name is so synonymous with America or whatever. And so I wanted to at least lean into that. Like, well, I got the bad one. And that was my original reason for wanting one. And then I shoot it, and I'm like, well, what's the problem here?
Yeah, what's wrong?
And so we went and bought all of them. We now have all of the All American 2000s ever.
Right.
I mean, the gun was manufactured in small numbers, and specifically with the aluminum frame ones, there's only about there's less than 3,000 of them. So we have a significant sample size of the ones manufactured, and they shoot the same. And I think it's good.
They all feel the same, and the aluminum ones feel different from the polymer ones.
They do.
And we do have a post and pre, a no recall polymer gun. Both aluminums were recalled. And then very nicely, in one of the aluminum guns that we got in, it had, because Colt collectors are so incredibly autistic, it had the recall paper.
Its original recall paperwork was included.
Right.
And this is how we had to find out what actually happened with this recall. Nowhere online were we able to find like any actual information about this.
Right.
And so we got scans of this stuff just because of like from the archival benefit of these guns. Like I even talked with a guy on the internet who had one of these guns that he sent to get recalled. He sure didn't seem to remember what was changed. Like maybe he didn't see the paperwork. Maybe Colt stopped including it. Maybe this is like hard to find or something. But so we want that information to be out there because essentially what it details is they added a Glock style. It's not exactly a segmented trigger, but they added a trigger that makes it so you have to have your finger on the trigger before the trigger unit can cock the striker.
Right. And so you can see that here, right? So this is the no update gun. And this is just a solid trigger. And here's the update gun, and you have that articulation around a pin.
And that articulation unlocks the trigger itself from its from its movement to pull the striker.
And we'll show you how that works, because the way this trigger works is not how you normally expect one of these to work. And you can see right here. So we figured it out.
And
you're welcome.
That was what was recalled.
And that's it.
Yep.
From what we can tell, right?
It was a couple of parts surrounding the trigger changed.
And so, and the recall note says, replace trigger with new unit, stamp frame with asterisk.
Yep.
And that's the difference between these two. No stamp.
And there were people saying all sorts of like, oh, there was 100 different things changed. We changed all this, and And of course, I think probably some of that confusion may come along the line of when Colt got guns in for recall, they may have changed any parts out that they found offending, such as like some of the very early guns had non-polished feed ramps, which got attributed to the feeding issues. So if a gun came in without a polished feed ramp, I'm sure if you're Colt, switch them out real quick.
But the thing is that the recall centers weren't really Colt proper.
Right.
So I doubt that was happening.
Right. And
what I expect
Colt
is
stocked them with a bunch of extra polished parts, but
weird, right? No, what I expect happened was I expect at some point the feed ramp became polished. We have a non-polished feed ramp, but I think it's actually separate from a gun.
Yep.
Hold on. Polished. Polished. Polished.
I think this one is too.
Yeah. So whether or not, and ostensibly, either that happened at some point or these were always polished.
Right.
I kind of feel like they would have always been polished. But everything was so intensely counter-narrative that we approached with this gun. And
it really led us to do as much research about these things as we could. So I've watched every video on YouTube that I could find about these guns.
Mm-hmm.
I've read every stupid clickbait junk gun news article about these from every one of your favorite like junk gun news articles that I could find. We went and found the original NRA American Rifleman magazine reviews of these guns. In fact, we've got one of the magazines over here.
Yeah.
It's like we've got this is the first time that people really wrote about this gun.
And it was when it wasn't available. They were saying it's going to, it's going to, it's going to.
This gun was like a pre-production sample of this gun.
Right.
So we did as much research as we could, and I guess we're happy now to share that with you as far as filling in the gaps in this gun story. So Eugene Stoner, Reed Knight were in a position where they had been working on a pistol concept. It was something Reed Knight has said in interviews, it's a gun that he was the manufacturing end of, and Stoner designed the gun, which sort of makes sense. That Knight at this point isn't really a gun designer so much as he's a manufacturing whiz, and Stoner understands manufacturing engineering. It's clear in everything he designed.
Right.
But he's not the guy with the tools. He's the guy with the I'll design it.
Yeah.
So they really were an incredible union of guys to have together. Now they, so far as I've seen, only ever had 2 prototype guns, one polymer frame, one aluminum frame. One of them had a barrel bushing that, if it wasn't integral, It was very, very short, and then one had a removable barrel bushing.
Yeah. And so a lot of people say that, oh no, the removable barrel bushing, that was a Colt edition. No, it's in the patent.
Yes, it's in the Stoner Knight gun.
Yeah.
So there's certainly like one narrative confusion point going on there. Now that said, Colt, like we'd explained, was in dire straits, couldn't afford their own R&D. So they've got they sit down with Knight and Stoner, and again, Colt's got Stoner had a very good relationship with Colt for a while, except that relationship turns like horribly sour at some point because Colt decides to stop paying the royalties that it owes to Fairchild that Fairchild owes to Stoner. So after their initial negotiations, Stoner warns Knight, do not agree to anything where they give you money. They are insolvent. They will not pay you.
Right.
That if you're going to get something from them, get their hardware, get their physical assets, because that's all they have left.
Right.
Like Stoner has been bittered by the whole way the AR-15 M16 has gone down for him up to this point. That he's like, dude, look, they're going to try and fuck us again.
Right. Yeah.
So as a part of their conversations, Colt is like, so how would like $50,000 down as a down payment for this gun work? And then I think Knight like socially engineers, like plays Colt like a fiddle, where he's like, well, I think you guys may actually you guys haven't been paying Mr. Stoner, so first things first, you're paying him his royalties for the M16. And then Colt's like talking to their lawyers and like, what? We haven't been paying him? Well, that's crazy. Yeah. I guess we forgot to. So they end up having to they end up getting the checks flowing to Mr. Stoner, and at this point, I think it was $1 or $2 a rifle he was to get, and they made 5-6 million of them at this point. So that's a lot of money.
Right.
Colt doesn't have 12 million in assets sitting there. Nobody does. So Colt then they set up an installment plan and they're making the payments, and so eventually they stop making these payments. Again, Colt check got lost. Hee.
Right.
And so Knight gets back in contact with Colt and he says, I've been talking with Mr. Stoner. He says that you actually have some guns, physical guns that belong to him. I think we'd like to see that. And so those guns are actually in custody of Fairchild still. So as part of the contract agreement, Fairchild would keep some guns to sort of prove like we designed this and then you guys then have this. And of course Fairchild had owned Armalite, and it's a husk of its former self. It like sort of exists, but not really. And so they go out to the facility where Fairchild has these things stored. And as Knight tells the story, it's about 80 rifles, and it's all of the original Armalite prototypes. It's all of the super early AR-15s, all of the super early AR-10s. It's Stoner's own M6 and M8 prototypes that was like, the M6 was Stoner's rotating bolt, that was an M1 Garand operating system, and the M8 was the first time he had direct impingement. Like, that is the birth of Stoner's internal piston direct impingement. The gun's just sitting there. and as Knight tells the story, they're just like laid about in a warehouse. They've just sort of been there. And so, Knight recalls being completely blown away, but like he poker faces this like a motherfucker. Like, he's got a check for $50,000 that he's prepared to like say, look, I'll cut you this check and then you'll give me the stuff back, and that'll be part of our payment. Like, because you guys are insolvent, but you've got more money tied up in these guns than you owe me. So like, I'll loosen your insolvency and then give me some guns. So they're sitting there talking, and then they find AR-15 serial number 1 is included in this batch. And so the Colt's guys, Fairchild's guys are trying to say that AR-15 serial number 1 easily worth $50,000 on its own. And then Knight is like, nah, I don't think so. It's not worth that to me. Like that's some brass fucking balls. Like, you could have this gun with this check that you have in your hand. And he's like, I don't want it. So he takes pretty much everything but that. And then of course at a later date he returns and gets it anyway because eventually this gun comes along and Colt manufactures them, and again there's a pay for play going on.
Right.
Once Colt stops production of this, they go insolvent. Knight gets the tooling for these guns back. Knight gets the design. He owns the design of this gun again. And by the end of it, Knight also has AR-15 serial number 1. So he has everything. Essentially everything Armalite made that wasn't then owned by the Army or the Air Force. Right. And so that becomes, you can go to, I believe it's in Titusville now. You can go to he has a museum where he's got these guns on display.
And so in a roundabout way,
he robbed Colt.
This gun allowed Reed Knight to rob Colt of the crown jewels of the museum.
As Colt continues to make payments, like they go to Colt in Hartford, and Colt has a reference collection of machine guns, right? They've got one of all of them that they use for design purposes or research purposes, or like really it's probably just a way to hedge their money. Not a bad way to hedge their money, really. And by this point, it's after 1986, so these are all transferable. And Knight recalls it as like it's 300 plus machine guns. And Stoner is quoted as saying he wants nothing to do with those fucking guns. I think it's you're out of your damn mind if you think I'm taking any of those. So I guess he didn't want any of this World War II-ish era junk. But Colt had a bunch of M16s transferable, and Knight was taking them for $200 a piece.
Right.
And Like he knew that they were worth more than that, but he didn't realize that soon these were going to be worth 20 grand, 25, 30 grand, 40 grand.
Right.
Goofy money that he would be able to get for them. So he absolutely robbed Colt blind because Colt was making lots of bad business
Colt
decisions.
put themselves in a very,
but
bad position.
This gun is sort of an integral part. Like you know, Knights Armament Corporation ARs. I don't think they happen without this gun having also happened, because Stoner made himself a very Stoner got very wealthy, even more wealthy.
Right.
But so did Reed Knight, and it was because of this gun that was a commercial disaster.
And the funny thing is, though, the tragic part of it, because it's funny when Colt gets bit.
Right. It's at the end of the day, because Colt has this like way they carry themselves, and it's funny when it goes wrong,
when they fall down. But like the thing that's not fair,
the thing that by the end of us having these guns, we realized is, dude, it really sucks.
Yeah.
This gun was the end. I mean, it wasn't the end of its evolutionary line, but it was like this. It's gone now, right? And man, I don't think it deserved it. I think this gun is novel and remarkable in a large number of ways. And I love the way you put it. I'll let you put it. How do you feel about Mr. Masada Ayub?
So, and this is important, right? Masada Ayub built his career in small part on shitting on this gun. And you guys know I'm a Chevy guy. I actually love the Chevrolet Corvair. Chevy, when everyone else was making these huge gas-guzzling behemoths, Chevy's like, let's make America's first unitary chassis. Let's have it take an air-cooled engine in the back. It'll be super fuel-efficient, really cheap and easy to make. And they sold like gangbusters. Ralph Nader made a bunch of shit up, which was later proven. Like the Department of Transportation did a study and determined that the Corvair was as safe as newer vehicles. But Ralph Nader became a household name from shitting on the Corvair undeservedly. I think Masada Ayub, I'm not saying everything he's ever said is wrong. I'm not saying you should take, whatever. But I think he's the Ralph Nader of the gun world.
He got this one dead wrong.
Dead wrong.
Especially at a time where, like, he's suggesting at this point in time, like, his recommendations are you can carry a revolver. And in fact, J-frames hammer, like your shrouded hammer ones.
Right.
Like, you're on something if you think there is a J-frame with one of the hammerless J-frames.
Yeah.
You're on one if you think that it's got a better trigger or is more shootable than this.
You're out of control. Yeah, no, and I think, and you can't really blame him, right? Because he writes his article and it bites, and it's kind of just like now, we've got that incentive to chase that dragon.
You can't say I was wrong.
You gotta double down, right? And, and I'm sorry, but unless we got the statistical mega miracle,
like,
we got all of the good Colts, like ever. But you know what? It was, I'm sorry, it was just bullshit. And it was bullshit built upon bullshit. Because you know what probably happened? It was probably just like now with clickbait shit. It's probably that Mossad started talking shit.
And NRA Magazine had an article after this where they were like, 25-inch groups at 25 yards.
And then other journalists are like, I want a piece of that. And they started writing on it. And we started looking. It was actually in a comment on Ian's video about the
Ian's video where he talked, like Ian's video, which seems like it was hastily done, so I can't.
Because he said he borrowed the gun or whatever.
We can't hold it against him too much. Like, he saw somebody with one at the range and he was like, ooh, I'll do a video on that. Mm-hmm. And he sort of just reads what Wikipedia says about the gun, where it's like, oh, it's bad. Nobody likes it. It was crappy and horrible and the trigger's unusable. And then, like, he goes and shoots it and says, oh, this trigger's just, gosh darn, it's so bad. I can't hit anything.
Staple gun. Yeah. But we looked at the comments and we found a common thread. Every once in a while,
you'll find somebody who very clearly owns at least one of them, who very clearly actually shoots it, and he's like, what the fuck is everyone else? Why are you so fucking stupid?
Yeah, no, he's like, this comment went into detail. He's like, this is a complete bullshit, and I've had this gun since it was new, and it was ruined by 5 journalists. Yeah, and I thought that was so poignant.
There was 5 journalists. It was like Masada Ayub and a couple of guys at the NRA, American Rifleman Magazine, and they gave this gun such a bad name that nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. And then you actually have one of these guns and it's just not supported.
It's not supported.
What are the chances that these journalists only have the worst possible ones and everybody else has the best ones?
So there is a chance, right? Because
the very, very first round of review guns Colt sent out, there has been an alleged significant issue with the accuracy in the barrel. I have seen this described as the actual bore of the barrel was non-concentric,
Right.
but it was put on a cut rifling machine that rifled it as though the bore were concentric.
So basically, they had rifling on one side.
You had 2 very deep grooves on one side and then none on the other, which would probably do funny things to bullets that you shoot to it. But Colt became aware of this issue before the embargo and like go ahead and publish your reviews was up,
Right.
and then sent out new guns to the journalists saying like, don't talk about those guns, those don't exist.
Yeah.
Which again, it's Colt like of all the quality control checks you can do, wouldn't you like, I'm gonna look down this barrel and go, huh?
Yeah. But we haven't seen exact evidence of that either.
Right. So we haven't seen any pictures
yeah.
of these guns. I'm sure Colt destroyed them because they wouldn't want people finding this evidence.
Right. It's totally possible, totally within the realm of possibility. But like the reviews that mention that then say, and we got a new one and we changed parts between them and it still just could not fire. And I think that's bullshit. I don't believe it. I do not believe them.
Right. They were saying that they couldn't make the guns work reliably and they had to cannibalize parts from the guns, and even still, like, just to get them to fire, they had to switch parts between guns.
I do not believe
that's
them.
such a load of bullshit because we've got 2, relatively
like
low
200
serial numbers.
Well, they're 200 apart.
Of course, that one's relatively low. This one's like the 2400 one of these guns ever made.
Right.
And this one's like 2700 gun ever made. Like, maybe these journalists' super early guns were that fucked up, and Colt manages in 1 year to fix them all? Bullshit.
Well, these were, because all of these were done in 1 year.
Yeah, all of these were made in the same year.
So,
bullshit, Colt.
but the thing is, the reviews kept going to 95.
Yeah.
Like
everybody who's like getting the polymer guns, and even the late polymer guns after the recall, they're talking about how bad the guns are.
Yeah, and it's like, I think
belief.
it's impossible. Like, it's so, and I promise you guys, we did not go into this expecting to do that.
Yes.
We're going to be accused, oh, you guys are just being contrarian. You didn't do, well, yeah, keep thinking that, and I'll keep buying these for cheap.
Yeah. What you guys need to do is tell everybody how stupid and dumb we are. Post this everywhere.
Yeah.
And tell them how stupid we look so you can drive the price down more because I want more.
Yeah, no. And another comment we found was a guy, I forgot what forum it was on, but it was a competition shooting forum.
Yep.
And he talked about how he had been competing with his All American 2000 for years. And he had he had never read any articles or anything.
Right.
And years into it, people approached him and say, like, your gun sucks,
yeah, don't
right?
you know your gun sucks? And he's like, what? What the fuck are you talking about? This is a Colt.
Yeah. Which was just like, that totally, that vibes with our experience.
Yes. That if your perception of these wasn't tainted, and again, I wonder how much, and I think that was the original reason for this channel is, we started this because the opposite effect is true,
right.
Where somebody who you respect or whatever is not necessarily who you respect,
right.
But people respect the opinion of says something's really good. You'll be walking around saying, "Man, I'm gonna sniff my turd. It smells like roses. My turd smell. I rub my turds on my face. It smells so good because Grandum said it's great."
Yeah. But yeah,
and so I think I don't know. There's something in psychology. I'm sure there's a term for it where one guy who you respect says something bad about it, and no one's willing to cross him.
Right.
Like Masada Ayub said, this gun's a fucking liability for police officers to handle because it's super dangerous, unreliable. The accuracy's so bad, the bystanders and just nonsense. And this dude's talking mess to the point of he's saying the barrel bushing wiggles so much the gun shoots all over the place, dude.
Well, and other people brought that up, and. We consistently see that. What a nightmarish design choice put a barrel, to put sights on a moving part of a gun, Yeah, a nightmarish decision to put sights on a moving part of a gun. Have you seen any automatic pistol? The sights are on the slide.
Yeah, the slide moves. The slide moves relative to the barrel. It's how they have to
work.
But
the other thing is, most slides don't have the barrel actually in contact. It's not bushing.
Right.
Right. So the barrel can move relative to the slide, and the sights stay in the same position, and that actually cause an accuracy problem. With these, for one, there's a positive detent.
Yes.
So it's very positive, and I'm moving this hard, and this is.
And of course, with the slide off the gun, because of course the slides rock on the frame a little bit.
Right.
That's normal. But with the bushing off the gun, or the slide off the gun, that bushing wobble is.
It's almost imperceptible.
It's barely perceptible.
Yeah.
I have found adjustable target sights on 1911s where the rear blade just sort of wiggles that much. Nobody's ever said anything about them. Everybody's talking. I think they were even offered factory from Colt. You could have this particular target sight installed. The rear blade just wiggles a little.
So there's a positive detent 4 lugs, and then the recoil spring keeps it in place.
The recoil spring keeps it in tension, and guess fucking what? The part of the barrel that sort of bears up on things is there in it. So when this wiggles, the barrel, I mean, maybe not so much for rotation, but like the barrel moves with this.
It's imparted in a similar way.
Like the barrel's tight enough on this bushing.
It
almost just holds itself in place. That is well made. That's competent. And then like people are saying like 25 inch groups, or Masada Yuba saying I think it was like miserable or horrid accuracy or something. How? How?
It's nonsense.
And he's saying this in like 95, 96, 97, like well after the fact that that Colt had bad barrels on some review guns, sure. But this dude is out here writing books about how bad this gun is, way past the point that like that was something you could blame.
So let's take a look at this trigger. I'm gonna pull it. It's gentle. It's smooth. You get just a little bit of stop here, and it's a pretty clean break, and it breaks at the same spot every time.
Every single time.
And you come off, and what do you get here? Second strike capability.
Yep.
Like,
which we even used some of. So
yeah,
it certainly works.
This is very smooth. And we sat and we compared this. We're like, well, let's hold on. Maybe it's, because we don't shoot a lot of double action. Yep. Maybe this is way worse than like a good double action. So we took an M19.
Which is a really nice
really
double
good
action revolver. You go and try the double action. It's maybe like a little bit lighter on the revolver. It's not as smooth.
It's not as smooth.
And when it comes to the actual human trigger interface, this being a straight back trigger is incredibly svelte compared to like every revolver with as hinged as that, because a revolver has the same amount of travel,
right? But
it's hinged, so you're doing this, which tends to make you want to have to adjust your grip as you're pulling the trigger. With the Colt, that's not a thing.
It's not. And so, how is this so smooth, right? Because it is very, very smooth for a double action trigger. Yep. Well, let's look at that because it's kind of. It's kind of bonkers.
It's out there.
So your trigger moves in a linear path with this sprung. That's
essentially your trigger return spring. It's on a plunger.
On a plunger, and the Glock style safety just keeps that plunger from moving, right?
Yep.
But it's sitting on roller bearings. The thing is gliding on roller bearings backward into a straight path, where this is fully cocking the striker and then releasing it at the end of the path.
And I guess as a thing we should mention on the striker, it's been alleged, right? Of course, we haven't actually experienced this because there's only 2 of them. But on the prototypes, apparently this gun had a 6-pound trigger brake. Meanwhile, on these, it's alleged to be a 12-pound trigger brake. I don't know that it's actually 12 pounds. To me, it maybe feels a little lighter, but it may also just be because it is so straight back that you don't 12 pounds on a trigger that's curved is going to feel very different versus 12 pounds of something straight back.
Oh, by the way, we checked all of these to see if, again, maybe we had apples. And this was the one that had the most rotation.
And I mean, it's not fantastic, but
it's not a big deal.
At 100 yards, I bet that throws you off by like maybe 6 inches. But these weren't
at 100 yards.
These aren't target guns, right? They don't have adjustable sights. Where you're like, from a standpoint of what they were intended for, is like 10 yards is a pretty long shot. I mean, it's a service handgun, right?
Right.
It was meant to replace revolvers that you weren't shooting past 10 yards anyway.
Right. But I'm telling you guys, we were beating the shit out of soda cans.
Yes.
At
25 yards.
No problem.
In fact, my first shot, I reacted with, like, I saw a hole in the can and I was like, did I do that?
And I was like, I watched you do it.
I was in disbelief.
Yeah. Because that was the first time you had shot it out, out.
Yeah, because we shot it at like 10, 15 yards.
Yeah.
Indoors in the shop. And
yeah.
I mean, they shot good. Shot a respectable group with it.
Hell, the barrels are MPI because Colt can't help it.
Yeah.
Magnetically particles.
And I guess that actually leads me to another interesting story that we didn't find the answer to this one. So it has been alleged by several places I've found that Colt didn't actually make these guns. That every part of these guns, or at least some or most of the parts of these guns, Colt farmed out to a bunch of different manufacturers, and all Colt did was assemble them.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't found any actual indication one way or the other if this was true. The one thing I think I would at least be able to say is the barrels being mag particle inspected, like Colt does with all of their barrels ever since ever, leads me to believe that Colt was probably making these barrels, if not the person they were contracting to, if they're set up to do mag particle inspection. Not that it's horribly hard to do that, but like if they're
it's definitely not needed.
Right, if they're putting that much effort into it, especially for a pistol barrel, like it's not like they're just like crapping these guns out and don't care about what's going on. And you see a lot of that where, like, as I tell the story, especially, it sounds like Colt is just desperate and they want to like cash grab real quick. I want to stress to you guys that I absolutely cannot I cannot support a theory where it's explained that this gun was just a cash grab. Colt put a lot of conscious effort and thoughts into features that they crammed into this gun. Crap that's like answering questions that probably weren't even like actual issues.
I know where you're going.
And Colt was still interested in solving them. This is a gun designed in the 1990s. It's got a left-right interchange, like it's got swappable mag catch.
And all of the mags are ambidextrous.
Like, I think the Bren 10 existed at this point, and I think maybe it did.
And look at how easily it swaps.
Right? Like, pop it up.
And
pop
bizarrely,
it up like
Colt doesn't mention this in the manual.
Yeah, Colt didn't mention this in the manual, except whenever the guns got recalled, they then included instructions on how you do this.
Right.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah. And we have the original paper that says, amend your manual by doing this.
And there you go.
It's that easy, yeah. That's a shockingly easy.
And I mean, the way they pull this off is sort of with a compliant mechanism where that peg holds it left, right in the gun, and whenever you push that peg in, it just compresses the spring. And then this unit holds it. I mean, you could mess this up by knocking that peg out at this point.
Right.
And that's probably why Colt didn't include the instructions, is they realized, like, cops will just do this when they're bored. Cops will be sitting in their cruisers at 4 a.m. going, and then the spring launches across their cruiser, and they go,
Colt, can I have a spring? But so the one super interesting thing that you uncovered was the concern that some departments that were, revolver sexuals had with auto-loading guns. And this is the one I hate. So you hear me talk about this a lot in the PDPF video, where cops want to be able to execute people. They want to be able to press a gun up to you and fire it. And the concern with the Glocks and stuff at the time was, they won't.
Like,
it won't work that way.
You're wrestling a suspect and you barely get your gun out and they try to stuff your draw. Because, like, again, this was like the thing that, like, before the internet and before people, like, this is the biggest benefit, I think, of gun YouTube, where stupid ass ideas like this can actually be tested and you can learn, like, no, that's not real. But like, if an American rifleman in the 90s, before everybody's got the internet, somebody can just go and write a story where it's like, Glocks are extremely not great for cops because what if you draw your gun and the criminal, the criminal sees it's a Glock, and so he pushes the slide just slightly out of battery. Your gun can't fire. Yeah. You're fucked, bud. Like,
it's absurd. But the point is that this was it was a real concern insofar as
it's a psychological worry that cops have additional to whatever it is that, like, where they're getting their next donut or what have you.
Right. So they added this wedge that all it does is positively keeps the slide in battery with a little bit of extra resistance.
Like maybe 3 or 4 pounds of hold that isn't made up here, so you don't feel it the whole time you're racking the slide. It's not like they just added a much heavier spring to the action. They didn't need to do that.
They did something so that psychologically it's addressed.
Right.
I'm sorry, that is not a cash grab. That's a very serious. It means you're serious about your product.
That shows that they listened to what their target audience was saying, and they were like, "Here's how we fix that."
And one of the only times in the existence of Colt, they listened to their target market and did it, and they were punished brutally for it. And the path where the rollers ride as a steel reinforce, they totally could have gotten away with just shooting that, but they, of course, specifically reinforced it.
The other thing that I saw people have complained about is, like, well, the frame just had polymer rails. And I'm glad we have this one taken apart because we can see steel embedded rail, steel embedded rail. This is a steel embedded rail as well. It's just polymer overmold.
And then you've also got a rail in your locking block to keep the fit in your rotating barrel uniform across the slide. That's really thoughtful.
And, like, this more or less floats
Yeah.
and is retained only by the slide itself. So your locking block, as it were, is retained by your slide, which is then retained to the frame by the steel rails. I think that's freaking, like, they could have pinned this into place and just been stupid about it. I think this is so incredibly elegant. Like, it's the Saint-Exupéry test, right?
Yeah.
The designer knows he's achieved perfection, not when there's nothing left to add, pins and all sorts of dumb shit to hold that in there, but when there's nothing left to take away. This cannot be simpler and still serve its job. Couldn't be. I think it's brilliant. They could have pinned the locking block in there. Even on the aluminum guns, they could have milled it integral and just put a little steel recess where the barrel's going to beat up against. Did they? No. They came up with something that I think is pretty darn smart. And of course, Colt themselves didn't do that. That's something they borrowed from the Knight Stoner prototype.
Right.
But much to Stoner's credit, again, it pains me physically knowing that Stoner, through most of his life, didn't get to see those royalty checks that he was owed.
Right.
He didn't see a lot of success with his follow-on stuff. Like the Air 18, I think, is brilliant. He didn't monetarily, right, in his life. He didn't get half the credit for that he deserved.
Right.
He went on to design like the Stoner 63. I really want to get my hands on one and compare it to more other 5.56 LMGs. But we went on to design a lot of other good stuff that really didn't see much success. In the last design he gives us before he passes is this. I think it's fantastic. And Masada Yub will sit there and blow smoke up your ass telling you, oh, I can't shoot this gun worth of shit, so it's inaccurate. Like this dude is seriously doing the all Glock shoot low and left of gunsplaining, where it's like, hey, retard, it's because you suck at shooting.
Yeah.
The only reasonable explanation is, like, if it's shooting a 25-inch group at 25 yards,
you're fucked up.
Maybe get in contact with Colt, and if they say there's nothing wrong with it, the problem exists between the gun and your torso.
Yeah.
It's your fucked up little grublings.
And like, it was funny as we were, so we shot a lot of handguns at our range time, and there was only 2 handguns that, because we'd shoot the soup can, and it'll start coming down, and then the fun thing to do is chase it down and shoot it back up.
Yeah.
There's only 2 handguns that we were able to do that with consistently: the Walther P99, which is the platonic ideal of a handgun, and these. We were policing Coke soup cans as they fell down a hill at 25 yards, and the whole time going, what the fuck do you mean?
And it's a thing where just feeling the trigger on the gun, you could be forgiven. And of course, this is something we've both got experience with in gun journalism. There are gun journalists who will maybe shoot 1 or 2 rounds through the gun or none,
right,
and then just publish a script that they're given by the company that makes the gun. Like, this is the best gun ever. You should go buy it. The MSRP is really, really low. Actually, it's really great. You should buy 10.
Yeah.
Where there's so much bullshit that goes on there that it's entirely possible these gun journalists who are saying, oh, it's the worst gun ever, trigger pull is completely unmanageable, they never shot the gun. They never held one. Especially before the internet, they don't have to prove a single thing.
How fucking prove it? It's just like the other guy said.
Right. Masada Yub said it. How can he be wrong?
Call me? Yeah, you gonna call me retarded? No, I'm gonna stick with that. Masad, you are the Ralph Nader of guns. And just like he fucked up American compact cars, I think you fucked up American self-loading pistols.
Like, I think we've touched on a little bit already, but how these things feel to shoot, I was not, because I guess the only rotating barrels I've shot before is the Beretta PX4s, and they've got height over bore like a motherfucker. Yeah. And they didn't really feel different to me compared to Browning tilting barrel actions. With these, I mean the bore axis isn't.
It's not low.
It's not low.
But it's normal.
It's pretty normal.
Yeah.
These things, especially shooting these side by side, even with the conic SFX that we have.
Yeah.
This shoots flatter.
It's flat. It's softer.
It fucking shouldn't shoot flatter than the gun that's got a dot on it. It's got a long barrel on it. It's got a fuller size frame on it.
And it's heavier, right? So
this shoots flatter.
Yeah, these shoot flatter, and so I think that the delay is spacing it out more because there's always the same amount of energy under the curve. If you're shooting a 9mm, you're shooting a 9mm. You can't change that. You can't reduce the recoil. Like that's retarded. But what you can do is space that energy impulse out.
Smooth it out.
And this feels like the curve was the curve on this one feels wider than the P99, wider than the Canic.
And I think part of that has to do with the fact that when that barrel bottoms out, it's coming straight back.
Right.
When the barrel in a tilting barrel action goes, the barrel's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that attributes to flip.
The other thing here is that we have the kind of interesting pattern on the barrel locking lugs. So you're first just moving together, and then before the barrel unlocks, you've got rotational energy that gets imparted and kind of transferred out. I feel like that just spaces it out a little bit, and I feel like that makes it.
I mean,
just
it's
smooths it out.
Certainly a slower unlocking cycle than with the.
You do feel it
disconnected.
You do feel it. You do feel it go, kind of slurp, right? Which I think is great in a handgun. And so the other thing that journalists at the time, one journalist was like, actually, this isn't innovative because the Steyr 1912 also has a rotating barrel.
Yeah, they were trying to say that this gun's like, it's all old hat, and Colt's so out of ideas, they're copying a gun from the 1912s.
Right. And I have one of those. You guys have often seen it, with the gold shit on it. This is a lot smoother.
And it came about like implementing that in such a fantastically different way that like what's going on here, especially here, that's not old hat. That's so far ahead of its time. Y'all weren't even ready for it. It's rock. Yeah. It's like it's heavy metal in the 60s.
Yeah.
They'd be like, please stop Satan music.
Yeah. No, but for sure. So you're gonna see us shooting this. I like this gun.
I hate to be so fangirl about this gun, and probably a lot of that's just because I'm capable of admitting when I'm wrong about my feelings about a gun in this regard. Mm-hmm. Try getting that from like most other gun tubers, but I was so wrong about my initial feelings about this gun that I can't help but fangirl about it at least a little. Like, oh my god, this thing is astronomically better than I expected, and I guess that makes it easier to sing the praises of it because you were surprised. Yeah. And man, surprise is, I think, a good word for it.
And that might be coloring our. I don't think it is. So now's where we should do our thing, where we separate from the price and everything on its own, as an objective measure, as a target pistol, poor.
As a target pistol, it doesn't. If what you were expecting from Colt is any autoloader you buy from them is comparable to the Gold Cup National Scratch 1911.
No,
it's not that.
No, it's not that. As a weapon for duty use,
yes,
I would say excellent.
It's fantastic.
Yes, 100%. I would say excellent.
And like, I'm not the kind of person. I don't like double action revolvers. In fact, when I shoot revolvers, I shoot them single action more often than not. My initial reaction after shooting this like at the 25-yard range was like, this makes me look like I'm capable of shooting a double action revolver.
He looked over at me. It was when he chased the can down. He said, "Is this what old guys who shoot double action feel like?"
Because I've seen people who are good at shooting double action revolvers, and it's like stunning. Because then you try that, and it's like, oh my god, I'm good at flinching. I'm really good at flinching. But with these, I can get going like 10 times faster, more accurate with these than I can with other double action revolvers. And I think that's one of those things that and of course it's so freaking cliche. Like you have to shoot it to actually experience what exactly that's like. Is like this transforms this in the sort of safety and human factors. I guess we can call it a human factor safety,
right? A
human engineering safety factor, which is such a fucked up thing to think about.
Right.
But like this gun is so safe from a standpoint of the end user not knowing exactly what they're doing using it.
Right.
Just like a double action revolver, but is then so much more shootable than it.
So I'll say where my quibbles are, and my quibbles rotate around the locking block and the update.
Yeah.
So the trigger update, in my limited experience,
it feels different, and I do like how the non-updated trigger.
The non-updated trigger feels better, and also there's a chance for, and this is on all of these, for the updated trigger not to go all the way forward.
Like you think it's all the way forward enough to reset,
and then you just pull it, it's dead. Yeah.
Right. And part of that we managed to find was that there is a flat spring in here that probably could have been designed better. And sometimes what causes the dead trigger is that this bugless on the bottom of here has to pop out from underneath this. It essentially works like a Glock connector bar, but instead of it being upright, it's pointing straight at it. It's really an interesting system, but that sometimes if that spring gets, the further bent out that spring is, the further forward the trigger has to go to reset. So certainly there could have been a fix there. And in fact, one of these guns that was dead triggering so frequently, I had to bend the spring back a little bit, and then it fixed it.
Yeah. So that was a thing. The non-updated trigger
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have that
doesn't
issue.
have that issue, which is fascinating. As for why they did this trigger update, we don't know why from the documentation, right?
Right.
Because they just say it's to make your gun better, right? What it seems to be is it seems to have been an out of battery, or not an out of battery, a drop safe thing.
Right, but
this is a zero cock striker.
Right, there's no preload on these strikers. I mean,
and there's a safety that
an out of battery safety.
Yeah. So and what's funny is before we read that we were like, these are inherently drop safe because they're zero cock.
Right.
And so what you had said, going with your theory about what court lawyers had heard.
Right. So I guess to put everything in perspective, the reason that it's attributed to Colt, like why they went from Stoner's original 6-pound trigger to a 12-pound trigger is in this. I mean, I don't know that this specifically applies to this gun. I haven't seen documentation to that effect. But the reason that happened with a lot of other guns, like they got heavier triggers, they got extra safety features, and they have text on the side that says, "Please don't put this in your mouth or feed it to your kids." Like they have all that crap on the guns.
Yeah.
A big part of that was because at the time this gun was designed, the Protection for Lawful Commerce in Arms Act didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And there was one notable, there were a couple notable examples of manufacturers have something tragic happen with their guns, and somebody aggrieved by that tragic thing sues the company and wins. And the reason Plaka happened is they realized, eventually anti-gunners realized that's a cheat code to bankrupt gun companies. Like you can make gun companies bend the knee like that by just suing the piss out of them. So that's the reason Plaka happened. But manufacturers prior to that, knowing that was a certainty that they could get that protection, which it's insane that protection is required.
Right.
The court system it's like stand your ground laws. Like everybody should have agreed from the beginning that that's not something their company's liable for.
Right.
But I guess because it needs clarified anyway, Plaka came along. But before that, companies were making their triggers worse, such that if somebody accidentally shot themselves and had the self-inflicted sort of tragedy happen,
then they couldn't be blamed.
You couldn't sue them for they're selling guns with hair triggers and they didn't tell me.
Yeah,
which is so stupid because I guess the legal mechanism that works out is you put the light trigger in the gun and they didn't read the manual because they don't have to. They shot themselves with it and they're like, I never read it. You didn't tell me. And all you need is some judge who's stupid enough to go oh, that's your fault. Darn you, stupid Colt.
The funny thing you said is they must have asked the engineers, could this fire when dropped? And the engineers would have said if it achieved exit velocity and
so the lawyers are like, it needs to have the Glock trigger because it could maybe pretend. And the other thing I was thinking was maybe if you stage the trigger all the way and then you hit the gun, but
I don't think so.
Having the Glock safety doesn't fix that though because it's already disengaged. So their concern seems to have been that the gun's chambered and it gets dropped like that, and it's got enough energy that the inertia of the trigger pulls itself all the way to cock that striker all the way and let it go without the slide coming out of battery because I guess it fell right on the slide. Like come on.
Yeah.
I imagine Colt set up a testing rig where they were swinging this gun around on
it was in a centrifuge,
right? Yeah. And they just go bang.
Yeah.
And eventually got it to fire once, and they were like, well.
Let's just put the trigger bugless on.
Right.
Yeah. But so I think we've covered just about everything, right? Just think real quick. No, I think that's it. We got a gun, and another cool thing about this particular gun is we know it's got real use because it's got a prison tat.
Yeah, this one's been in an evidence locker.
Yeah. So we could shit on it.
Yep.
We shot it. We were like, something is wrong. We got another one. We're like, this one's still good.
We got one of the other earlier models that were. Some people say the aluminum models are worse, and that's where all the issues existed with the aluminum guns. Yeah. And then Reed Knight in his interview, when asked about these guns, said, "Oh no, the aluminum ones were the good ones, and that's the ones you should have went with." In that Colt cut corners whenever they moved to the polymer guns. Right. And I'm like, I
don't buy it.
Nobody knows what they're talking about.
And this is one point of disagreement that you and I have. The aluminum guns, the locking block is able to move a little bit.
Right. And it floats on all of them, but it floats freer in the polymer gun, and on this one it seems like it rotates.
Yeah, and so that rotation affects the...
it makes the trigger pull feel different.
Right, because it changes the path that one of those bearings is going, and it makes it a little more gritty.
And even if you switch locking blocks and triggers from gun to gun, it exhibits this fault. So it's something in the difference of the frame. Right?
Yeah.
The frame is the uncommon denominator.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the width of the rails up here.
Yep.
But that's so I don't like this as much. I much prefer the polymer frame.
This
guns.
is certainly smoother, and for speed shooting, I think that the polymer frame is better. But for whatever reason, with the aluminum guns, I can stage it so good that I mean, I wouldn't have expected myself to have been able to have shot soda cans with these at 25 yards because there's some handguns that I can shoot well, like 1911s, right? That I would then still struggle a little bit to do soda cans at 25 yards so consistently as I did it with this anyway.
Right. So the thing that you said is that it is crunching, but there's a particular crunch that you get.
There's a crunch that I get with both of them, even with the other triggers in this gun. So like maybe the crunch is designed in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But he gets that crunch right before it breaks. And I will say staging this trigger is a little bit of a challenge. You have to like have some experience with it.
With a little bit of practice you can stage it, but I think it's easier to learn staging these than it is with revolvers because revolvers rotate. And learning where your finger is on a rotational track is hard. Yeah. Where your finger is because like here it feels like a pinching motion. It's much easier.
Yeah, no, I'm with it. I'm with you. But yeah, well, I'm not with you on the gun choice. I prefer the polymer. You prefer the aluminum. And that's okay. It's okay to disagree, except it's not okay for you to disagree.
Say some shit about this.
Yeah, say some shit.
Go ahead in the comments and tell us how your grandpapper tried to shoot a whole bunch of crims, and then they actually stole his lunch money because his Colt All American wouldn't work.
Yeah, his Colt All American got sad
because he tried to shoot at them, and then he shot a 25-minute of angle ring all around the perp.
It left a perp-shaped outline on the.
And tell us how that was the gun's fault because it's entirely like. Here's the thing: is we're not trying to say we're good at shooting double action guns because I'm fucking not.
I'm not. I sit there with my revolvers doing that.
But then we shoot this fucking dog shit, ostensibly dog shit, and it shoots great. Like I'm not saying like, oh look, you guys should learn how to shoot a double action good, fucking idiots. Us with minimal experience on these guns, we're shooting them great. And the more rounds we put through them, the easier it gets.
My favorite handgun is the Walther P99, and
that's a trigger queen gun.
Yeah, it's a trigger queen gun on single action. On single action. And I'm like, I don't hit that decocker. I like that it's there, but I don't. And I'm shooting this sucker, man. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Colt trapped lightning in a bottle. I think they made the perfect implementation of the give us a service revolver sidearm trigger in an automatic, make it perfect for duty use. I think they fucking nailed it.
They did.
I don't think it was possible to nail it. And all the way down to it shoots so flat.
Yeah, it does. It shoots retardedly flat.
It's mind-boggling, right? They made it perfect. And you know what?
And people complained that the grip was too thin.
It's a revolver grip.
Yeah, they put
a revolver grip on an automatic. It's great. Yeah. I like it.
And they did it by not adding any bullshit back here.
Yep.
It just holds the magazine.
Yeah, because all of the mechanism is in the top half of the gun.
Yeah.
This gun has a shallower mechanism, penetration depth, if you will, than a Glock.
Yeah, and the rotating barrel thing that people like to bemoan, that would have made for really cool swappable. Colt planned to do it. They planned to have swappable dugs and different barrel lengths.
There are some incredibly rare prototypes Colt did sell of short barrels that that just made the barrel bushing end right at the end of the slides, like a compact model. Colt in their marketing even said, we're going to have swappable calibers, we're going to have swappable barrel bushings, we're going to make this gun like a whole platform. And it got killed before it had a chance to get off the ground, and I will forever be. I could imagine they made a target model of this, right? Yeah. That they did put a light trigger in.
It could have been single action.
Yeah, I mean, you could have made a single action version of this gun.
This could have did the P99, right? It could have
a little bit before the P99.
Yeah, because mechanically almost everything is in there to accomplish the same thing, but it didn't because some journalists lied.
The journalists made up some fucking stupid ass stories about how it's much easier to wrestle with the Colt can't hit anything than I can't hit anything.
Right, or just I listened to what the other guy said and that's that.
There's probably a lot of that.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, that's the Colt All American 2000. Don't forget to tell us the detail that we missed and how stupid we are.
How your favorite gun tuber said, "Oh, boo hoo hoo! It's impossible to hit anything," and it's because the barrel and the sight moves, and that's why.
Yeah, because that moves.
Like dude will be hitting like 4 feet low and left because he doesn't. And again,
dude, it doesn't even like shake.
Right.
Like,
I'm hitting 4 foot low and left, and that's because the barrel bushing wiggles like.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that like we know what we're doing when we shoot double actions. We don't.
No.
I'm fucking clueless. This gun just shoots good.
Yeah, it just shoots good.
You just have to think in your mind, what I'm doing here is a double action revolver, and then it shoots perfect.
You know what gun I said the same thing about? The Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380. I couldn't hit a damn thing with it until I looked at it and I said,
Yeah.
"You're a J-frame."
Of course, I'm that way with the P38s
Really?
because they cock the hammer as you pull it for like the last little bit of off the sear.
Yeah.
But I was consistently hitting low with it until I was like, just treat every single trigger pull as a. Of course, I do that with the Berettas as well.
Right. That's funny.
I'm helpless.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time. All right. It's.
I think that just hit it.
Yeah.
Is that a light strike? Might just be ammo.
Just restrike it.
That's right. There we go. Modern convenience.
Oh, remember, this is Phoenix ammo.
That's a really, I mean, that's a solid hit, so I'm not going to blame the gun for that one anyway. So that's a soda can at 25 yards. And they hit that one at least once, that one at least once. I mean, it's absolutely shootable.
All right. You are peppering this shit.
Nope, just didn't lock back.
Yeah, it hasn't locked back for me once. But I know it's because of my grip.
Right. Bro, and that thing shoots so smooth.
Well, let me finish this one out.
Yep. All right.
Eminently usable. Well, you are peppering this shit.
Oh wow, that's holy shit. Bro, are you seeing this?
Yeah.
I pussied it at the end, but.
Oh, this trigger gone dead?
Oh, the magazine came out.
Oh, might have just pushed it.
It was me. I keep doing that. That's what it's been every time.
It might just be your grip. You could switch it over to left-handed, really.
Actually, yeah.
Remember, Mr. Ayub said you can't do that. It's a very inaccurate gun. Can't do that.
So, always got to make sure your guns are loaded when you're gonna do a video. We've done more with the Colt All American funny, since we recorded the first part of this video, a bit of time has passed.
Yep.
We got more of them.
Yes, I think four more, something like that.
Total, yeah. Because we keep trying to find bad ones.
Yes. Because we've been told they exist.
Yeah, and so we've been looking for one. And a couple of interesting developments. One, we found an accessory that was unclear previously if it ever really existed.
Right. There was like talk in some catalogs about Colt's going to be introducing caliber conversion kits and short barreled kits for the All American. I don't think caliber conversion kits ever materialized, but Matt did manage to find a short barrel kit for one of these guns.
And in its original packaging, which it's out of it now, but here is the kit. And like Colt being Colt, it's like so poorly marked. Colt barrel bushing kit, AM 2000 accessory number CA10124.
Be sure to pick it up at your local Colt dealer.
Yeah, very descriptive. Really glad to have found that. So we're going to try putting that on to this one. But before that, we did find
a not so great one.
Yeah, a not so great one. And this was a re-import. So this was exported to somewhere in Europe at some point, where somebody clearly shot it a shitload. And like it shot so much where, you know, people are always complaining. And as we touched on, the front sight is just the wiggle. And as we pointed out here,
really no wiggle to speak of with guns that are functioning properly.
Yeah, and like the whole slide wiggles, and to that extent, it wiggles less than a Glock.
Right, Glocks wiggle more than that.
And then we found this one,
which has a concerning degree of wiggle.
That's real, right? That's wiggling, and we determined that is like this thing is just clapped out. Like it has been shot a lot, and so the plunger that actually keeps it locked into the slide is just tired.
Right, the plungers, the spring is taken a set or it's just collapsed, and the detent no longer comes out enough to actually engage with the slide and keep it tight.
So we can show you that here. This is supposed to be a happy little boy sticking out into the slide, and on this one,
it doesn't hardly stick out at all.
Here, we can show that. I also like that this one, as imported, was a lefty gun.
Yeah.
So yeah, this doesn't really stick out, and we're not exactly sure how they got these in, because
there's no cross pin or no threads, no like the sight doesn't come off. It's not retained under the sight. So best we can figure is there's a spring, detent was put on top of it, and then they swaged the opening of that hole, which makes this non-serviceable, which is kind of frustrating because this is a fairly complex part to make a non-serviceable part. So if it seems like our theory is true, and this is otherwise non-serviceable, it may launch an adventure to try and excavate that detent from there, replace the spring underneath it, put the detent back in, and find some way to capture it. That may be adding a cross pin or trying to swage the hole that we just excavated, but maybe an adventure for another day. Although this does go to show, after a substantial number of rounds, these guns can loosen up pretty severely.
And this one was very clearly beat up. The other interesting failure we happened to have on this one was this is a replacement extractor. I know that because I shot the extractor across my shop. Firing it just a little bit, it had the old type extractor. This is a early gun, which is, and one of the reasons I bought it was because it was a plastic gun that had the blued, the polished blued slide, and it had the early extractor, which you can see here, that only halfway, the retainer spring only halfway covers the extractor. And I had to replace it with a new type extractor because, again, it flew out across the shop. And we actually have video of when we were shooting this gun of this extractor trying to wander out. Now, there's a couple interesting things here. For one, this gun never got any recalls, never got any updates. So that's why it had that old type extractor on top of it being a early gun. Like very quickly, the new type extractor came in. This gun also never had any updates, and it's only it's 5,000 off from this one. Never went back in, but had the new type extractor. Fascinatingly, this gun went in for the trigger recall, but retained the old type extractor. And if we can find a flaw with these guns from what we've observed, it's definitely
the
that.
extractor design's not good.
That extractor design is not good. This one's fine.
Yeah.
This one's totally fine.
It's tricky to get out of there once it's installed.
Yeah, and it's a little complicated when you look at it, but it's totally fine.
Yep.
But
It's a strong extractor design. Frankly, it's probably one of the strongest extractor designs I've seen on
Yeah.
a semi-automatic pistol.
Yeah, pretty slick. But so there's an update. We found the closest thing to a lemon we've gotten so far, and it was the highest round count gun that went to Europe and back just to break for me.
And I'm certain the round count on this gun has to be pretty extraordinary, because on the sort of beat up one that we showed off last time,
Right.
I've put at least another 1,000 rounds through that gun without cleaning it. This was shot in the rain and the snow and the hot and the cold.
Right.
It was shot dirty with the crappiest ammunition I could put through it, with good ammunition that I put through it. I've shot it out to 100 yards, and I've even taken to experimenting with the gun after I crossed that 1,000 round point. I was curious if you could get the trigger pull lightened and loosened up a little bit. So I got my polishing bobs and I polished up the trigger surfaces and the sear surfaces. That improved it some, but the trigger weight was still pretty heavy. So I disassembled the striker mechanism. Come to find out, the striker mechanism is a little poorly designed. It's got plastic in tension to try and hold it together. Trying to disassemble the striker mechanism means that you're going to break that plastic, especially because at this point these guns are old enough the plastic's probably started to degrade just a little bit. So, to try and resolve the issues that I was facing, I disassembled the striker broke, ended up coming up with a sheet metal version that was cut out with a laser that I then glued a 3D printed part onto to give it a little bit of a reinforcement, to give it the knob shape on the back of it. And I started experimenting with lighter springs put into this gun. I could get the trigger pull down to around 6 pounds before it started light striking more consistently than it set ammo off. So I tuned the trigger pull up to about 6.5 pounds. It runs reliably with all but my crappiest ammunition, and this is stuff so crappy Glocks will not consistently set it off, so it's pretty garbage stuff. But most ammunition, the gun just runs perfectly fine with. Probably put 300 or 400 rounds through it with that new spring configuration. It's done pretty fantastic. I have not cleaned the gun for 1,400 rounds. It's run. I think I've had 1 or 2 failures to feed. I identified one bad magazine that had the early follower that would allow the rounds to bind up. I had that happen to me whenever it was, went out and shot it when it was like 10 degrees below zero. It was freezing cold, and I didn't bother with fixing the magazine because I didn't want to take gloves off. And I tried pounding on the magazine. I could not get the magazine unjammed. So to the gun's fault, the early magazine design with the old followers certainly aren't very fantastic. However, I set that marked that magazine, set it aside. Since pulling it out of commission, haven't had any issues. Maybe like the odd failure to eject here or there, but I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the gun. So
and again, that's with your clapped out, your version of this gun.
Right.
Which, so mine has an import mark, yours has an import mark and a evidence number on it. So these are like real used ones. We haven't had any problems with our more healthy versions. And all that to say is the one he's describing doesn't show the degree of wear that this one does. Right? Like this is very clearly and manifestly a clapped out gun. And that said, it's still working.
Works,
It's still working pretty well, and it's still shooting pretty soft because it's a robust lockup, and just generally a pretty damn well designed little gun. But the thing that you did that was really interesting was you managed to get it to that 6 pound trigger.
The original 6 pound trigger pull, and you go any lighter and it starts to light strike.
Right.
And I think it's sort of magical that the thing that Colt could have sold as an accessory is a 6 pound trigger kit.
But no, instead you got the bushing kit, which they sold like 5 of.
Right. From what I was able to find, they manufactured like maybe 100 of these, and they wanted to destroy them once they pulled the guns out of production because maybe warranty or something. I don't know. So very few of them ever found their way onto the commercial market.
Well, and you'll see this get installed onto this gun here in a second. But so this is something that we really need to put on the gun computer once it's done. But the only complaint that I can really have with I'll hold it, like this, because this one's meant for that.
Mm-hmm.
With the All American trigger, right? As we've discussed, we went into incredible detail onto why it is the way it is and how well suited it is for that purpose. But with this heavier trigger, and actually I don't think we had this
I don't know if we did.
last time. So with this heavier trigger, you feel a little bit of a wave pattern, like a little bit of bumpiness.
Yep.
And we've kind of determined that that's because
The striker spring in this gun is like 4 inches long. It's a
Yeah.
massive spring with relatively small coils, and it's not on a guide rod. It's on
Yeah.
like a shitty plastic thing held in tension, so the spring goes like an AK recoil
Yeah.
spring goes
the whole time you're pushing it
getting
back.
compressed.
And so if you cut a lot of that off,
So it's just a spring that goes, it's a spring this long that
Yeah.
goes. And it
You're
doesn't
not
have the
dealing
opportunity
with
to
all that.
collapse. The
Right.
trigger pull gets substantially smoother while it gets lighter.
yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's about
a-
right.
yeah.
10 pounds, like 12 pounds is what everybody says it is, but
It's not
I
12
don't think
pounds.
it's actually.
Yeah. So here, and let's try it on the less globetrotty version. It's a lot smoother. 9 pounds 6 ounces.
I don't remember. Yeah, I like this one.
Yeah. I pulled it past a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's try that again.
That's the funny thing with these is they have no over travel whatsoever.
Oh, no, this one's 10 pounds. Super interesting. But yeah, so I'm going to be messing with that myself. Trying different spring combinations. You know what the funny thing is? Even though this one's heavier, it feels smoother.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Reed Knight is onto something with the aluminum guns. Just feel better.
Yeah.
Because I've swapped my light spring assembly into my aluminum gun. It's hilarious. It's a joke. It's a better trigger than a Glock at that point.
Yeah.
Because Glock triggers are also right about that 6 pound range.
Right.
This thing is silky smooth and straight back.
So yeah, definitely we're going to be experimenting with that. I think that's great. This one, it's still just working. The one thing that sucks is I'm kind of sad that I've lost that extractor because you can't get the fucked up ones, and it's almost like a little piece of history missing. But so let's make up for that by doing the conversion here. Kind of excited about this. So let's lock her open. Okay, cool. I didn't have the mag in all the way, I guess. There we go. Lock her open.
Yeah, and you don't have to pull the trigger to disassemble it, which is another criticism from the time about Glocks that Colt
Right.
fixed.
Right, but... Well, so yeah, that was interesting. We did find another issue. This was one that I had acquired recently. I had not taken it apart. It felt really tight. And there was a little tiny bit of rust poking out here. Didn't think much of it, but the detent was completely frozen in place. And we had to, we sprayed some oil in there to work it back and forth, but it kind of just smushed itself off. Interestingly, it seems like the detent was softer than the slide material itself.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something to check on. If you're interested in grabbing one of these, you should be able to, with some force, it shouldn't be loosey-goosey like this one, but you should be able to rotate the barrel in order to disassemble it. So I think a maintenance point is definitely to not let that get super dry.
Yep.
Keep a dot of oil in there. But so yeah, this is now 2 that
The
we
failure
have.
point has just been this stupid front cap design, so that may be another part to end up looking at some point as far as...
Yeah. Well, now we really have a reason to see if we can excavate that and see what's going on back there.
Yep.
It should be a fairly reasonably easy fix. and especially from Colt's perspective, right? It would have been very easy to fix. But yeah, now we're gonna have a dedicated short barrel one.
Especially with as wide as that slot is.
Yeah.
You could just come in oversize here.
Yep.
And take that hole out bigger as an excavation method, and then stake it back in place.
But yep, so we'll definitely mess with that. But so here is our stock unit. And then let's get our hyper rare short barrel unit. And so these would have all came in there. It's like now, it's made of 90s plastic, so it's falling apart under its own weight. But let's slap her together. How? Because it doesn't actually say anywhere. How long is this barrel? Three and 3/4 versus how long is the full size?
4.5.
4.5, I bet. Yep, 4.48. So you take off 3/4 of an inch with the compact
And
package.
it's really as short as you can get the slide the way it's made.
Right. Pretty good fit. We're not like that's what you want to see. Just the tiniest bit of motion. What do you think?
Yep, a little bit of motion, and it has a tendency to spring back towards the middle.
Yep. And then our little shorter recoiling spring. And we can slap them back together. That's great. There we go. Ow! Fuck me. Cool. That's AM, by the way. Just. And there it is.
The shorty.
That really makes a big difference.
It
in the
reminds
overall
me a
footprint.
lot of the short slide high powers, where it just sort of looks out of place.
Yeah.
I think in a cool way, but
I mean, it looks. I didn't think it could look much more 90s, but it do now.
yeah.
It's super interesting. Well, there it is, guys. A compact officer's model. All American. What do you think?
I think it's pretty nifty. Certainly, the rarity of the thing means that we'd probably be somewhat irresponsible to go and pound on the thing and find its limits.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, if a second one shows up, we'll have to snag it and then pound on it and find its limits.
Yeah.
But from a mechanical standpoint, it's really not changing much about the action, and I think that's part of the beauty of a rotating barrel system, where making it shorter doesn't really cost you the same way a tilting barrel. The tilt the barrel actually has to take becomes progressively.
Yeah, and then you wind up
progressively more
having
hilarious.
this very strange trombone shapes to
Right.
like, clear the slide. But yeah, of course, this is the only one that ever got made, and I would have done foul things to get like a super long one.
Right.
Like, I think that would have just been
A Target model All American, that'd be hilarious.
that would have been so funny.
Especially if they did something funny like had the front sight thing have a hood that comes back onto the slide to keep it aligned.
Yeah, it would like set screws or
Like
something
a
retarded.
spring-loaded hood or something.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it, I wasn't sure if I was going to leave this kit on a gun, but that issue we found has kind of forced it.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm definitely going to try it out and see what we think. Of course, it's not going to really make much of a difference from a shooting feel. It'll be slightly flippier.
Slightly lighter, slightly snappier.
Yep. And frankly, not much more concealable because
Right.
the part of the gun that prints is the grip. But they were trying to do something cool, and I do think it's cool that they went for, like, what they went for is how short can we possibly do this.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty neat. Yeah, anything else to add?
I think that's just about it. That sort of wraps up our look at the All American, at least for now.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, now we have two things to explore. One, how to get these detents out, and whether we can refresh them by adding a different spring and installing them in a different way. We now have two detents that need that, and two, experimenting more with the trigger pull weight.
Yep.
So yeah, we probably are only going to need to get like 4 or 5 more until we finally find the. But it was funny. We were having no issues with these. Then we found our like beat
problem
ones.
child.
Yeah, that had a problem, and then it causes us to look. Oh, here there might be a problem. We then take this one out of the box that I had never messed with, and the end didn't want to come off.
Yep.
So that's just funny. But
And this, I mean, this could be something that was a result of owner negligence, where he thought it wiggled too much, and he thought he'd do some gunsmithing to it, and ended up doing something that froze in place permanently, and then was just like, oops.
Yeah, we were careful taking that thing off. We shot oil into it. We rocked it back and forth. We did everything really that you ought, and it just kind of gave. So something weird happened here, and it was also the only area on the gun that was showing rust.
Right. And on the gun that otherwise got pretty good finish remaining, so
Yeah.
it may have been a thing where a guy just figured he like crap Loctite into it and be like, great fix.
Yeah, it's good now. Pew! I don't know why the gun gives me it now gives me a Ghost in the Shell vibe that it didn't before.
Yeah.
I think it's because the end is so short and the exposed locking lugs.
I think it might even be the symmetry.
Yeah. There's a severe vibe here. Double action. That's what double action means. It means you fire the
Twice
shot.
as fast.
Shot the once and to the go.